There's a product sitting in your kitchen cabinet right now that was built for people who cannot chew solid food. It was designed for patients recovering from surgery, for people on feeding tubes, for the elderly who can no longer digest a normal meal. And at some point, someone in a marketing meeting looked at that product and asked a different question. Not who needs this, but who can we convince needs this? I sat in meetings like that one. I helped write the brief. And I watched a clinical feeding supplement get repackaged as an energy solution for tired men in their 40s. This is how that happened, and how to spot it happening again. The category is called nutritional supplements, but that name covers two very different products. One version exists for people who cannot eat normally, post-surgical patients, like cancer patients, the elderly with swallowing difficulty. For them, calorie density matters more than anything else. If a spoonful of powder can deliver 200 calories, that is a genuine medical win. Where those calories come from matters less than the fact that the body is getting fuel at all. The other version exists on a supermarket shelf next to the protein bars, marketed to a completely different person. A healthy, working adult man who eats 3 meals a day and does not have a medical feeding problem. Same category name, same shelf sometimes, completely different purpose. The product I worked on started as the first kind. It became famous as the second. Here's roughly how the conversation went across more than one company I've worked with in this category. The clinical version of the product was profitable, but the market was small. Hospitals, pharmacies, a narrow, low-growth customer base. Someone ran the numbers on a much bigger market. Men aged 35 to 50 in cities with disposable income who felt tired most of the time. Not sick, not malnourished, just tired. The ordinary tiredness of a demanding job, a commute, a young family, and not enough sleep. That tiredness was the opportunity. The brief I remember read almost exactly like this. Positioned as an energy and vitality solution for the modern man who has stopped taking care of himself. Notice what that sentence does. It does not say our product is medically necessary. It says the man has a problem, vitality, self-care, and implied failure, and we have solved it. The formulation barely changed. What changed was almost entirely the story wrapped around it. The ad campaign followed a script that will feel familiar if you've seen this playbook before. A father too exhausted to play with his kids after work. A wife who looks at him with quiet concern or mild disappointment. A moment of before, gray, low energy, distant, then the product, then after, the same man, now laughing, lifting his child onto his shoulders, present again. Nobody in that meeting said, let's use sugar as an energy source and call it vitality. Nobody needed to. The formulation was inherited from the clinical product. The story was built entirely for a new customer who had never been told what was actually in the tin. Let's look at what was actually being sold. A single serving of that supplement typically listed protein, fat, and carbohydrates on the label. Nothing hidden, nothing illegal. But when you convert those numbers into percentage of total calories, more than 60% came from sugar. Protein made up a small fraction of the total. This is not a secret. It is on the box. Almost nobody reads it that way. That gap between what a label technically discloses and what a customer actually understands is where this entire category lives. The playbook has 3 repeatable moves. You'll recognize the shape of this if you've watched how parental anxiety gets built and sold. The fear that your child is falling behind, that other parents are doing more, that you might be the reason your kid struggles later. Same architecture, different fear. Move 1. Find an anxiety that already exists and name it precisely. For parents, it was falling behind. For men in their 40s, it was becoming irrelevant to your body, to your family, to the version of yourself you used to be. Nobody had to manufacture that fear from nothing. It was already there, quietly, in almost every man that age. The work was just naming it clearly enough that a product could attach itself to the feeling. Move 2. Make the identity threat bigger than the physical claim. The ad rarely says increases energy by X%. It shows a father who cannot keep up with his own child, and a wife who has quietly started expecting less of him. That is not a nutrition claim. That is a threat to how he sees himself as a man, a husband, a father. Once the fear is about identity rather than biology, almost any product can be positioned as the fix because the customer isn't evaluating ingredients anymore. He's evaluating whether he wants to keep feeling that way. Move 3. Borrow legitimacy from an adjacent, credible source. This product could say truthfully that it was used in hospitals and recommended by doctors, because the clinical version genuinely was. That clinical heritage was never explained to the new customer. It was simply implied, sitting in the background of the packaging and the tone of the advertising, doing quiet work it wasn't designed for. None of these 3 moves involve lying. That's what makes the mechanism durable. Every individual claim can survive a legal review. The persuasion doesn't happen in any single sentence. It happens in the gap between what's technically true and what the customer walks away believing. I'm not telling you this so you feel angry at a supplement aisle. Anger fades and changes nothing. I'm telling you this so you read differently. Next time you pick up something marketed around energy, vitality, or getting back to yourself, flip it over. Look past the front panel entirely. Find the calories, find the sugar grams, and do the same conversion I just walked through. Sugar grams times 4, divided by total calories. If that number is high, the story on the front and the substance on the back are 2 different products wearing the same box. This isn't about this one supplement. It's about a pattern that shows up anywhere, a real anxiety, a parent's fear, a man's fear of slowing down, anyone's fear of falling behind, can be attached to a product that only partially addresses it. The label was never hiding anything. It was just never designed to be understood at a glance. Now you know how to look. If this is the first video of mine you've seen, the last one covered a related version of this same playbook. This time aimed at parents and the anxiety sold to them about their children's nutrition. Same architecture, different fear. Worth watching if you want to see how consistent this pattern really is across completely different products. I spent close to 2 decades inside rooms like the one I described today. This channel exists to show you what actually happens in them. I'll see you in the next one.